The next presentation will be provided by Dmitry Gorbanov. He is here already. Hi again. Our QA automation team leader. Yes, hello. Dmitry's presentation will be split in two parts. At first, he will tell us what QAOps is and why it's so cool, important, and useful. And the second part will be dedicated to DevExpert's open source multi-tool for the daily task of a QAOps engineer. Dmitry, please, I'm giving the floor to you. Let's start.
Thank you, Marina. So I will share my screen and we will start. So let me know if you can see my presentation.
We can see. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I will try to be as brief and entertaining as possible, because obviously it's a holiday in Portugal and it's already like how much? It's like half of 7:30 in Bulgaria. So let's be brief. So I will describe you a little bit about QAOps practices, and I will tell you about the QAOps practices and just a few thoughts that we have about it. And overall, as Marina said, I will talk a little bit about our own tool. So let me start with talking about myself. My name is Dmitry. I work as a head of automation engineering here in DevExperts. And during my 15 years in IT, I spent more than 11 years working in different types of QA assurance and quality control projects. And I still believe in quality control over automation and optimization. And while doing so, I successfully survived several big automation projects. So what I will try to talk about. So what is QAOps? Basically, what does this term mean? Where it comes from? Who uses QAOps nowadays? Why everyone's life basically is going to be very tough without QAOps very soon. What can be done? And as Marina already said, well, I will have like a 5-minute bonus at the very end to talk a little bit about our own tool we developed to ease the QAOps routines, daily QAOps routines. So let's begin. Let's start with the QAOps. And I guess some people may ask, what? To understand what do we mean here, let's start with DevOps, because DevOps is definitely a term that is more widely known to you and us and everybody in the world. So DevOps, as we all know, is a practice that combines development, testing, and support procedures to implement so-called shift-left ideology. Shift-left focuses on early intensive testing to reduce bug fixing costs. So basically, testing and maintenance starts earlier in the software lifecycle process, so we can start seeing bugs earlier, we can start seeing different maintenance problems earlier, and by doing so, we will decrease the amount of problems when we will see when we will release the product into production. So this is basically to intensify the development routines. This is done by using tools like environment standardization. So your developers and your testers and your support engineers have really simple and useful tools to deploy any environment they want to test on. It's build and deployment automation. That basically means that if you're making a change, then your code and your product is being built automatically, and you don't spend any extra time on building it. And last but definitely not least, it's testing automation. So when you're making a change, you want to make it usable as early as possible, and you have to reduce your testing time frame. Basically, as I said, shifting left, shifting all your process left means that in terms of testing, it means that you want to run meaningful and fast and stable tests as early as possible. So once you get like a really early prototypes, you already want to have something to be tested. And by shifting testing left, in terms of how software lifecycle works, you are reducing the amount of testing you're doing on the later stages. And as I said, you want to split your testing, move some critical and easy testing to the earlier stages, make sure your testing is as stable as possible, and you run it as often as possible. So basically every change shall be tested. So here comes QAOps. QAOps stands for quality assurance plus operations. You probably already figured it out because this is how our webinar is called. So in order to understand how QAOps is applied and what is the exact point of time when it comes to our lives, let's start with maybe some distant point, and let's understand what are the key aspects of any testing. So how we usually see the testing. We are talking about coverage, an ability to articulate what we are testing. We are talking about data. It's the ability to articulate what are we testing with, like users, scenarios, the data. It's the configuration. It's the way we are performing our testing, either automated or manual, doesn't matter. We have to think about the configuration. And it's reporting, its ability to articulate the results. So we had some coverage, we get some data, we do something within some configuration, and then we have to say something about the quality of what we have experienced, so the proper decisions can be made. Should we go production or not? So, and when we are composing some solution, some technical stack for our testing, we usually are taking some already known tools. We basically do not compose any our own tools. So we are using existing tools. It depends on technology that is used for a product. And typical testing pipeline is usually a combination of some of these tools. So these tools are composing technological stacks for QA processes and QA projects. So basically how it looks like when we are starting the project. We start the project, we select these tools, we compose like a superposition of these tools, and this is our stack for like a prototype or alpha version, or just the first phase or first version of the product. We may feel ourselves proud, start implementing tests, and maybe we can even release the first product with no issues and feel ourselves very proud of it. But then usually when the products evolve, things start slowly start to get a little weird. At first, we may want to add some new features to the product, or maybe a new interface, or maybe some levels of testing to be more flexible in terms of time to market, and how fast we can release. And then comes the enterprise, or I call it like a maintenance phase inside the life cycle of the product. When your product is already released and it's popular and you have a lot of users and you have maybe even a positive feedback of your product. So your project is evolving, and then suddenly you have a multi-platform testing. That means that you are testing the same product, but on different platforms with different configurations. Then you may end up going through white label testing. This is particularly popular in fintech, for example, or as I know in gaming industry or in betting industry, when your backend functionality is totally the same, but the front end is redesigned because it is designed for a client. Yeah, so with their own branding and all that kind of stuff. So that may mean that if your tests were relying on a logic and a structure or a hierarchy of the UI, then you're in a big trouble. And last but not least, risk-based testing. So usually big projects have a lot of components and a lot of testing, and Kirill is the part of one of such projects where we have roughly 9,000 functional cases for core part. Obviously, it's not physically possible to run all these tests, even in multi-threaded mode, because even if we will be able to fit everything in a one execution, it will create more carbon than sense, probably, because we will spend more time investigating the problems rather than getting meaningful results. So you will have to pre-select the amount of tests you will run from your stack. And this combined by the year third or fourth of life cycle of your product, automation stack is getting really sick. It usually results in automation tests being not stable or stable in a very simulated environments or in a very thin layer of scenarios. So usually teams end up either not using, mostly not using automation tests, or running them rarely and for very specific reasons, and just getting back to manual testing. So, and that leads to a question, to an answer, an obvious answer, that for this integration processes of integration of QA processes into this maintenance activities, so these processes shall be owned. And here we have the QAOps. So basically, QAOps is a subset of the DevOps procedures, which are focusing on continuous building, deployment, and testing. And for building, QAOps is working with configuring pipelines, working with stability and performance of these pipelines. For deployment, QAOps focuses on managing resources and systems used for test execution. Also, virtualization is a very important part. So you shall be able to virtualize the environment you are going to run on. And very important part, the isolation of the data and the systems. Basically, that means that you have to be able to write proper mocks, which can be challenging in big, very complex systems like fintech. You have to spend a lot of time understanding how you can emulate something. And last, but definitely not least, it's the parallelization control. Kirill spoke about that, and this big topic, basically, it's a way how you can run your tests safely, and not only that they will be able to not fight with each other, but also not to spoil the system they are on. And testing, yeah, other things. That's the actual automation. It's the even more important part than automation is the definition of test scope per each stage. For example, unit testing and component testing, integration testing, all the stages shall have really well-designed scope. And management of the scalability testing. So that means that all the solutions we discussed on previous stages, like this monitoring of the stability and virtualization and parallelization control and mocks, these solutions shall be scalable. So if we are going to introduce new framework a couple of years later, they can use the same approach and same APIs we developed. In terms of tooling useful for QAOps practices there, obviously for building, you should know your CI tool. Probably it's the CI tool that is already used for a product. You obviously shall know, would like to know Git as an industry standard and the tool of the choice of your company. For deployment, obviously, it's the virtualization and orchestration technologies, such as Docker, such as Kubernetes, maybe VirtualBox for specific purposes. And Linux skills are sometimes a must. So yeah, obviously, we have Windows-based machines and Windows-based processes, but Unix never hurts. And in terms of testing, that's pretty standard skills we all know about for last decade, I believe. It's probably the language, the same language your product is written on, because in most cases, this is the language your tests will be written on as well. And very important part in QAOps implementations is that coding is not always a best solution. So maybe sometimes you may want to introduce some no-code tool or some basic tool that will solve your problem right away, rather than developing solution for a month on a plain Java. Yeah, so you may want to get into it as well. So trying to sum up, QAOps is a number of practices that allows us to implement shift left on a QA side of this boat. So basically, we all are into this shift left methodology, and when developers have DevOps, QA, and QA engineers, and especially software engineers in test or automation engineers, shall have their own methodology, and this is QAOps. QAOps allows tighter QA integration into early stages of a software lifecycle. That means by implementing QAOps practices and by following QAOps practices, you are going to integrate even functional or manual QA closer to a product development, earlier product development stages, which definitely will benefit quality of the product. And what's important, and maybe not that obvious, is that by introducing some of the QAOps practices and by running tests earlier in your lifecycle, you will get tighter dev to QA integration. That means that if you will integrate more testing early in the stages, that will make developers more interested in testing, in making their product more capable and more testable, which will definitely hugely benefit your product quality and will reduce the amount of headache you as a QA engineers will have. So how all this applies to real life? Let me give you like a really short example from the real life, like from an hour ago. We have a big trading system. It's the big stock and Forex and crypto and derivatives like Forex and options broker. Inside this mega system, we have a component that is responsible for interaction between core and mobile clients. It's the gateway. And obviously for such a component, we are doing integration testing. So in terms of the step, we have for QA, for dev, and for the QA part. So it's the customer MI between gateway and the core. It's Java and Spring based product and Spring based testing. It's some Oracle GDBC verifications for the data. Everything runs on TeamCity as a CI system, and we have pre-merge checks. So we are running roughly 500 tests for each pull request, and it sums up for a huge amount of tests each day. So what do we do in terms of QAOps practices inside this product or project? QAOps here is responsible for green master policy. Obviously, if we run our tests on pre-merge, so basically that means that tests are executed before pull request is merged. And if they are failing, pull request cannot be merged. It's critically important to have green master policy. So our master shall always be green, because if it's not green, then something either going wrong with compatibility, because we have a lot of dependencies, or something went wrong with the functional part, and basically we have to track the problem. Is the support of the environment, because we have 3 tracks for testing. So we have a master branch, we have a release candidate branch, and we have prod branch where we test different smaller patches. And all these 3 tracks have their own execution environment, and we have to support it and be able to automatically deliver new releases there, not only our releases, but also dependencies, because we have dependencies and they are also releases. So yeah, it's the very tricky part. So we have to do a proper advanced scripting to do that. It's the management of the test data, and Kirill already talked about this problem in fintech. So we have some data that is not that easily created. So we have to be able to manage the fragile data with extra care. For some data, we have to be able to split it between execution threads. For some data, we shall be able to just create it safely and also distribute between threads. And last, but again, not least, it's the code review for both development team and automation team in order to verify that code is safe in terms of scalability, in terms of how we process the data, in terms of if it's future-proof to merge this code, or we can do something so our code will stay testable. Yeah, so bottom line, QAOps as a practice do not replace DevOps. It is an extension. QAOps is not a particular process or an instrument. It's not a person, it's not a specialization, at least yet, but it's a set of practices that can allow you to make your testing more future-proof and make sure that 2 years after today, it will still be meaningful and stable. QAOps helps to, again, maintain scalability and stability of the testing, because the worst think about automation testing is when it becomes obsolete and not used, and money just goes into the trash. Yeah, that's it. So did you have such challenges? How did you solve them? Let us know in the chat so we can discuss it after my presentation. Yeah, let us know. Yeah, and here's the bonus. So I spoke about, I told you that I will present some tooling. So let me give a few words about it. So in terms of how we, in terms of the other QAOps practices we've seen in other of our projects, let me describe a few of them. For example, in one of the projects, we had a task on the QAOps level, QAOps integration level. So we had to get tests from Zephyr, physical tests, manual tests, descriptions. Then we had to use the information from Zephyr to parse the source code in Java and in Cucumber, to extract the metadata out of it and to create the tasks for a CI system. That's basically the project Kirill is working on. It's where we are getting the metadata from the source code so we can advancedly, so we can expertly and in a very complex way sort and fetch and batch the cases. Another example, we had a similar task where we had the Jira cases and we had to parse the mobile source code to extract the unique subsets of mobile configurations to run on, so we can also form the execution tasks for a CI system according to needs of a test environment. And another example here is when we had a task to integrate the source code, to parse the source code, get the structure, get the metadata out of the structure, including Java docs and comments and before roles and after roles from JUnit and other types of data like annotations, and to transform it into human readable documentation inside the test management system. So it's basically a reverse operation to turn the somewhat formatted code into some human readable words. So we implemented a number of such projects and a number of such pipelines, and we started to see some patterns there. So after we implemented another solution, we decided that we have to implement an overall tool for that. So we implemented it and we called it a switchboard. So the idea here is that in QAOps and in this integration stuff, we usually have 3 stages of the operation we apply to test data. We extract the test data, we transform it to a desired state, and then we apply it to a subsystem where it will be executed. This is done so the typical testing pipeline will be easier and faster. For example, you will not have to pre-select cases based on your risk-based approach manually, but you can use our tool to do that. So how we foresee it, how we foresee the tool. We basically want to have all-round covering for that. So we want the tool to be able to parse the tests from the source code. We want it to be able to batch the cases into the tests into separate batches, to be able to apply it to a CI system using API. So the CI system will handle the execution itself. and we will be able to get artifacts from the launches, create the execution reports, aggregate the execution reports into final report, and possibly even re-import this final report back into test management system. So we will have like one button solution. And right now, if you will try to use our tool, you will find following. So we have already implemented integration with source code parsing. We are able to parse Java code, Cucumber scenarios, and Jira cases. And the latest addition is that we can parse bytecode from Java machines. So we can parse Kotlin bytecode, for example. And we have an integration with TeamCity, so you can parse the data and then apply to a TeamCity, so it will be executed there. And the next step here is we want to spend some time on improving the execution report stuff. So we will complete the solution and we will work on it. And the tool is open source, so you are welcome not only to use it and try to integrate it into your pipeline, but also you're welcome to make any suggestions and send pull requests. So we want to get this, to make this tool really useful for a community. Yeah, so that's probably it on my side. Thank you very much for your attention, guys, and I hope that was useful. And I will be happy to answer your questions now.
Thank you, Dmitry. We have one question to you. The Q&A section.
Okay. Hi, Rafael. So do you see more QAOps being incorporated as a team practice as it was with DevOps? Do you think it will be an evolution of the QA role? I do think so, absolutely. Because I think that it became obvious that schedules of the delivery and timelines of the product development are getting shorter and shorter, and that projects new criteria and new requirements for testing. So you shall be able to maintain your test automation frameworks and tasks in a very in a state that they are ready, like most of the time, like 100% of time they will be ready to execute, and execute not only execute, but execute faster and stabler than before. So I do think that it is an inevitable future. So again, QAOps is not a role, but rather a superposition of practices. But yes, I do think so. It will be evolution. It will be evolution. So I believe even today, even manual engineers can do some stuff that relates to QAOps practices, like when you're a manual tester, but you can deploy a Docker image so you can test on it. That's basically some part of the QAOps practices. Yeah, I hope I answered your question. Okay, next question. While being a set of specific practices, could you possibly imagine QAOps transforming into a full-fledged role in a dev team in the nearest future, as it has happened with DevOps? I definitely think so as well. Yes, because even right now, we don't have a dedicated role, because right now we have we don't have a specific role at QAOps, and we don't have a position for that, and we don't have vacancies for that. But we definitely do some stuff in that, and we have team members that are like at least half of their work time are spent on QAOps stuff. Like I said, like in my example, so we have a gateway project, and we have pretty intensive testing there. So we have a lot of responsibility over the processes there. So yes, I believe it will be a full-fledged role, especially in the big enterprise products where you have a big manual team and maybe even a big functional automation team. There will be a lot of tasks regarding improving your processes. Yes, I do think so. I hope I answered your question.
Yes. Probably you can open the slide where people can go to the link to the open source resource and download the tool.
Oh, probably I can. Yeah. Oh.
Here, please, guys, feel free.
That's not a link, that's just a fancy presentation. I can share the link in the chat, I think.
Yeah, that would be nice. So if you have more questions, please share with us. If not, seems like we don't have any other questions. We can finish our talk for today. Thank you very much, our guests, for coming. Thank you, our speakers, Kirill and Dmitry, for your talks, your presentations.